all of you to kindly switch off your mobile phones or keep them in the silent mode as we do. Peace is more than just the absence of war. True peace is justice. True peace is freedom. And true peace dictates the recognition of human rights. In our quest for peace, we will continue the second technical session, and we have among us Dr. Pratip Chattopadhyay, Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, University of Kalyani. I would request our Principal Ma'am to felicitate Dr. Pratip Chattopadhyay, and Ma'am will be assisted by Dr. Pradip Roy of the Department of Political Science. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Roy. Before we begin our session, I would be introducing our second speaker to all of you. Pratip Chattopadhyay, PhD from University of Calcutta, is an Associate Professor of the Department of Political Science, University of Kalyani, Noida. He has been teaching for the last 15 years with specialization on Indian foreign policy and Indian political communication. With 1 book and 2 edited books from Routledge and nearly 60 research articles published widely in journals like Critique, Taylor and Francis, India Review, Indian Journal of Public Administration, South Asian Survey, and book reviews in international studies, Jadavpur Journal of International Relations, and several book chapters in edited volumes. Dr. Chattopadhyay is Assistant Director, Kalinga Institute for Indo-Pacific Studies. It's a foreign policy think tank. And he was executive committee member of the West Bengal Political Science Association and was also associate at the IIES, Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, from 2014 to 2016. He has been invited in Bangladesh, the place about which we had been discussing from the very morning, in Bangladesh for lectures in different universities, and has also presented papers in several national and international seminars, including Canada, Montreal, IPSA, 24th World Congress in 2014. He has guided 3 MPhil and PhD scholars, 1 PhD scholar till date, and is associated with the Madhya Pradesh Institute of Social Science Research, Ujjain, Delhi University, and Rajiv Gandhi University, Arunachal Pradesh, in different academic capacities, apart from West Bengal. So once more, students, a big round of applause for our second speaker. And we are, as I said, we are eagerly waiting to hear from him his own experiences, like we heard in our morning session. And with this, I welcome Dr. Pratip Chattopadhyay to the dais.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you, and hope you are still very fresh like in the morning session. And at the outset, I apologize that I am a bit late and I missed the opportunity to hear all the speakers, those who have spoken in the pre-lunch session. Nevertheless, the loss is mine. Anyways, thank you for inviting me. I thank all the organizers, Scottish Church College, Principal Madam, Department of Political Science, and other departments. I think there are the history and philosophy and political science. So 3 departments collaborating under Peace Studies Cell, and I hope that in Eastern South Asia such collaborations happen. Hardly we find such collaborations in Eastern South Asia. So this is a very good beginning, that all the, because in collaboration the problem is you have to decide on a speaker. Everyone would give the input that he or she could be a good speaker. So you come down to zero down to 1 or 2 of the speakers. So it is very vital that you collaborate, and that collaboration is missing in Eastern South Asia, and that is I think the background of which I will be speaking. I will be dealing with firstly some of the theoretical issues of diplomacy and peace, and then we'll focus the theoretical understanding in the greater Eastern South Asia. The coinage, Pradipto, I saw Eastern South Asia. I am a bit perplexed that how Eastern South Asia, do Eastern South Asia have a geographical map? Once I heard there is something called Southern Asia, but then Eastern South Asia is a good coinage, and Eastern South Asia is a sub-region, maybe within a bigger region of South Asia, because Eastern South Asia, as I saw, it can comprise of obviously India with Nepal, Bhutan and Bangladesh. But how can we forget Myanmar also, and how can we forget also Maldives, because they are so close to each other. Issues of diplomacy and peace. In theoretical literature, we think that diplomacy is a part of a dialogue process between nation states, and the main aim of diplomacy is to resolve all the conflicts through dialogue instead of using force and war happening. But in international relations, hardly we find that diplomacy results in peace-like situation. What we see that always we are faced with war-like situation. So this is the problem between theory and practice, because your theoretical formulation promotes that diplomacy will create peace-like situation. But in practice, we see that diplomacy actually creates what I would say not war, but war-like situation. Because as it was said that peace is not the absence of war, but peace is also a part of negotiation. You know, you cannot have peace without negotiations, prolonged negotiations. Now, prolonged negotiations could deal in, could have two ramifications. Number one, it could create friendship between nation states because you are negotiating. It could also bring before you some of the fault lines of each other so that you are no longer friends. So prolonged negotiations, you know, you are maybe students for 3 years, then 2 years post-graduation. So in 3 years, you are having relationship with your friend. But maybe one day you hear something about your friend which you don't know, and your perception about the friend changes. So even in prolonged negotiation, the ultimate goal cannot be friendship. It can also be animosity, it can also be enemy type of approach. Issues of diplomacy and peace are traveling in two opposite directions, because diplomacy is primarily to protect national interest. Diplomacy is primarily focused to secure the maximum out of a given situation in the exchange between nation states or between nation states and bilateral or multilateral or trilateral forums. So diplomacy theoretically has nothing to do with peace. It has to do with national interest. And if two nation states or 2 or 3 nation states are hell-bent on securing its own national interest, it will never result in peace. Because both are pursuing or both are viewing a particular issue from their own national interest perspective. So how can these national interest perspectives converge? They converge on issues of commons, the issues which have universal applications, issues like environment, issues like health, issues like pandemic, how to control pandemic. So these are issues of the commons. Now, while you have issues of the commons, and you have regimes to manage those common issues, here also diplomacy always guided by national interest, not regional interest, not sub-regional interest. You know, India going to a platform, maybe WTO or United Nations, and deliberating something, India would try to be seen, India would like to see itself as the champion of the entire third world, the leader of all the developing countries. Hardly it has in mind the specific interests, the specific demands of Bangladesh or of other countries in Eastern South Asia. When Bangladesh deliberates something, it has its own national interest in perspective. It has its own agenda. When Nepal and Bhutan they deliberate something in international forums or in multilateral forums, they have their own interest. So these interests collide. These interests leads to conflict, and diplomacy, diplomatic negotiations which happens in closed door, right? Hardly there is any video recording of diplomatic negotiations between two nation states or YouTube live streaming. We just can get a sense from the briefing of the Ministry of External Affairs that this was the crux of the dialogue between India and Bangladesh, or Bangladesh and Bhutan, or India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal. So hardly ordinary people have a sense. So there are two perceptions. Number one, a perception of the diplomat, a perception of the ordinary people. So if you go to Bangladesh, if you visit Bangladesh, I have visited several times, I have visited Nepal, even I have visited Sri Lanka. Many of you have went maybe for tour purpose or academic purpose. You see people there, all people everywhere, they are concerned how to lead their daily basic life. That is the main concern. Now, they are not concerned about what is happening at the topmost level of the political leadership or diplomacy. So nation states are having this problem. One is a top-down approach, one is a bottom-up approach. Top-down approach is to see the issues from the lens of diplomats, and bottom-up approach is to see the issues from the lens of the ordinary citizen. Now the question is, how many of us are concerned about foreign policy issues? Hardly foreign policy issue is a domestic issue when we discuss domestic politics. Only when there is a problem in our border, we are discussing Bangladesh. All the Bengali channels, media channels are discussing Bangladesh. You switch on to Maharashtra channel, Marathi channels, do they focusing on Bangladesh in the same degree right now? No. Because the border problem is with West Bengal. If something happened, direct impact will come on West Bengal, on Tripura, on Assam. So the problem is that this kind of perception generation, there are two types of perception generation. So we have a diplomatic angle of generating perception, what is going on. We have a perception among ordinary citizen, what is going on. Coming back to Eastern South Asia. Now Eastern South Asia, as I told, you cannot ignore India. The smaller countries of Eastern South Asia, the neighboring countries of India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, even Maldives or Myanmar, they cannot ignore India's presence. But what they will gain by accepting India's presence? That is the basic question. Basic questions of diplomacy in Bangladesh, in Bhutan, in Nepal is, what will I gain by accepting the presence of the bigger land mass that is called India? What will I gain? You see the investment pattern, Indian investment pattern in these states, very meager in comparison to European countries, in comparison to China. So then they would say, suddenly, when I visited in 2023 in Bangladesh, they are now saying that why India is investing in electricity domain. Why? What is the interest of India? And I question those intellectuals that, have you questioned ever the interest of China? What is the interest of China that they are investing? What is the interest of Netherlands that they are investing? So why are you questioning the interest of India? So the problem is, this is the perception that has been generated in the diplomatic circle, and that has trickled down among the ordinary citizen, that when India invests with a big brother attitude. When other invests, that is economic investment. So India's investment has always a political baggage that has been carried into the psyche of the diplomatic persons as well as the ordinary citizen in this eastern region, neighboring countries. Now, if we consider South Asia and Eastern South Asia today, what we see that peace is not there at all. Not only bilaterally, but also if you focus within those countries, peace is absent. Peace is absent simply because, and when a diplomat would feel that I am at peace, when a prime minister or president of a country or the diplomatic circle, the bureaucracy would feel that, okay, today I am very contented, I am at peace. When? Only when they would feel secure electorally at home, and they would feel secure that everyone across the region or across the world is giving attention or is giving importance to that particular country. So this domestic and external, Professor Chakrabarti has edited a very good volume on domestic roots of India's foreign policy. And that is also very interesting because this linkage between domestic and the external has always been a crucial game for diplomats. Which one to give preference? We all want that, we would love to hear singers from Pakistan singing in reality shows. But sometimes something happen and all these singers from Pakistan stop coming in reality shows. But we as ordinary citizens would love, even now maybe in YouTube we hear those songs. Question is that due to some geopolitical, regional and world balance of power, nation states sometimes, and even by the behavior of the neighboring nation states, sometimes they are forced to take decisions which may or may not get the legitimacy from the people. You see that in Nepal, we thought that if Nepal had been a democratic path, then everything would be very peaceful. Nepal had a constitution in 2006-07. After that, 15 governments have formed in Nepal, one after another, one after another. And the latest picture is very important, that two rival political parties are coming in coalition to maintain the power, to be in power. So what is this? Is this a peaceful situation? Everybody is saying that it is because to maintain the corruption, maintain the nexus between the leaders and the corruption syndicates and all, that politicians are in the same bucket, going beyond ideology. If you see Bhutan, what is happening? We are very cherishing that gross happiness index. Bhutan is talking about gross happiness index. Now what if your people stop questioning that what is happening? So if I stop questioning what is happening, I will be happy. So there is also a reverse angle of looking into this gross national happiness, that you don't question, you don't compare, you don't see the bigger picture. So what is there with you, you are happy, you are contented with that. So maybe Bhutan is an example of that. India, what is happening? Everywhere there is violence, violent like situation. But India's credibility is that it has at least maintained the democratic record. Never ever military has taken up. Even after seeing emergency for a brief period in our history, we have not gone away from the path of democracy, and also there has not been any military takeover in India. So that is the most important and significant feature of Indian politics. Problem is, when we analyze Indian democracy, Indian federalism, Indian secularism, we analyze it from Western perspectives. And when we try to analyze democracy, politics, secularism, societal situation in smaller neighboring countries in India, we try to analyze it from Indian perspective. So that is the problem. Some scholars, some post-colonial scholars would criticize those scholars who try to analyze India from the Western lens. Even in international relations, we have a long history of scholars talking about non-Western perspective. So also now today we are talking about whether our democracy can be seen in a post-colonial lens or not. So now the question is, if you try to see Bangladesh, If you try to see Nepal, if you try to see Bhutan, if you try to see Maldives, Myanmar from Indian lens, then there is very difficult situations in these nation states. But the question is, as within regions we have sub-regions, again all the nation states have their specific cultural and historical legacies. And these cultural and historical legacies have no expiry date. When there was a very fruitful relationship between Sheikh Hasina government and Indian government, for the last 15 years we thought that, well, all the historical legacies have been, sidelined. Now they will be in a Sonali Odhaya, golden era of relationship. But what happened? The undercurrent of anti-Indian sentiment, the undercurrent of those sentiments which were not in favor of seeing India as the guarantor of their freedom struggle, those undercurrents emerged, and the situation in Bangladesh has now come to this point. So this idea that historical legacies, cultural legacies have expiry date is not a good idea. Because people always remember history, people always remember their cultural roots. Why today in West Bengal we are at pains to see Bangladesh in this state of affairs? Because many of us have our ancestral linkages with Bangladesh, with the soil of Bangladesh. So that's why we are at pain. So these cultural baggages, these historical baggages, they do affect everyday life. So far as diplomacy is concerned, diplomacy always try to go beyond this cultural baggage, go beyond this historical baggage and try to view the contemporary. So there also there is a dichotomy, that diplomats are trying to go with the contemporary, but everyday people, the ordinary people, they are going with the idea of the past, the historical linkages, the cultural connections. So there lies the problem. Now when India invests in these countries, India do invest with the interest that they will not be in the Chinese bucket, they will be with India. When China invests in these smaller neighboring countries, China has its own interest. Maybe there is a difference in degree among the interests. Maybe China wants them to colonize them, China wants them to be in economic debt trap diplomacy. Maybe India will not go that further, but it's not that India do not have any specific interest. So there is difference in degree of diplomatic intentions, but not in the nature of diplomacy. When Bangladesh and India, these diplomats come together, do they consider peace? When peace will be achieved between two nation states is a big question for long enough. In history, also in world history, in international relations, we have this perennial question that when peace will be established. Now the answer, there is no easy answer to this, that whether we'll be having peace, because maybe at the at the level of paperworks, at the level of treaties, you are seeing that you are friendly to each other. But what is happening among the mindset of the people? People from Nepal, they used to treat India as the best destination for education. All the senior diplomats of Nepal, even now, are trained in maybe Benaras or in BHU or JNU. But nowadays they do not prefer India as the most important educational destination. In Bangladesh, if you go there, if you talk to the students, they would say, sir, we will not go to India to get a PhD degree, rather we will go to European countries, we will go to African countries. Because PhD from India is not given credence. And if you have a PhD from JNU, a Bangladeshi national having PhD from JNU and PhD from, say, any university from Australia or even New Zealand, university authorities will select those who have PhD from those foreign countries. They do not consider India as a foreign country at all. Why? No, I really asked this question, and I wanted to have some students from Bangladesh to have PhD coursework in our university. Maybe not in Kalyani, maybe Calcutta. Some are there in Jadavpur, obviously, because of these cultural exchange programs and all. But then the question is, unless and until we focus on the collective issues, on the issues of the commons, we cannot have a peace-like situation. What are the issues of the commons? Issues of the commons, as I told, are environment, education, health, even tourism, because Bangladesh people, they were living their daily life with the help of the medical help from India. Every day, in Apollo Gleneagles, if you visit, there are a long list of Bangladeshi nationals coming to visit the doctors there. So the question is that unless and until you solve your framework, how to look at the issues. We have all theories of international relations, realism, constructivism, Marxism, post-Marxism, post-structuralism, but we have not developed regional relations theory. Every region has its own specificity. It is not only to have a non-Western theory, it is very important because non-Western will also have one center, right? When we see books on non-Western international relations, we actually stop at books on Chinese and Indian thinking on international relations. So the question is every region, every sub-region, because these what I would say, these boundaries are political boundaries that have divided these countries, of smaller neighboring countries in South Asia. And now we are talking about this Eastern South Asia and all smaller parts of these areas. It is good to think in smaller parts because it may have a solution. It may have a peaceful negotiation. But what about this BBIN initiative? Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal. Motor vehicle agreements, road corridor and all. Even with those smaller organizations, what we call as plurilateral organizations, even with smaller organizations, there is no headway for smooth going of these commodities, products, even people. So why Europe do have a neighborhood policy? Why South Asia has no neighborhood policy? Because Europe is seen as a fortress Europe. You have this no problem going from one part of one country to another country in Europe. Before Brexit. Now Britain is outside, so you have a separate visa to go to London and other places, the 4 countries, but otherwise it's free. The movement is very smooth. 78 years, 75 years, it's a long time, 50, I think 52, 3 years for Bangladesh. But even now, border issues remain unresolved. Why? What is the problem that with so many developments in science and technology, now we are talking about artificial intelligence and all those things, and we cannot solve our border problem, we cannot solve water sharing problem. Whenever I go to Bangladesh, people will ask, what is the problem with Tista water sharing agreement and all? Why it is not happening? Why India government is not doing? What is the intention of India? Then I have to clarify that there is also a state government. So there you have to understand the inner political dynamics and all. So the question is, when we talk about issues of diplomacy and issues of peace, we have to chalk out what are these issues at the diplomatic level and at the level of ordinary citizen, so that ultimately we could arrive at a peaceful coexistence situation. Only that there is no war happening, only that there is no kind of military presence in our border between India, Bangladesh, or India, Nepal, or India, Bhutan, doesn't mean that we are at peace. Always India is concerned to what extent China is inroading in these countries. Always there is a perennial tension among India. Now Bangladesh, what is the biggest advantage of these smaller neighboring countries of India in Eastern South Asia is that they use their geopolitical location as a bargaining chip. They try to bargain and try to get the most from both India and China economically, to benefit economically, to have their own development. But that is not a problem. Problem is not to think collectively. Have we ever thought about thinking how to develop the road infrastructure, the rail infrastructure? China is thinking of this Belt and Road Initiative, so that it has command over entire stretch from this Asia, this to the West Asia and Central Asia. But we do have these rail linkages, road linkages from before independence, from earlier days, but we cannot reinstate that. Why? So we have to think as a unit, and that is the problem. Because when you talk about India, or when we talk about Eastern South Asia or South Asia as a unit, suddenly it would come up that it is a part of Indian subcontinent. So make India big again, as Putin is trying to do, bring back all countries and remake Soviet Union. So smaller countries are also fearful that if we try to think of as a unit, we have to think in Indian perspective. Will India give credence to our perspective? So always there is this battle between two perspectives, whether it is diplomacy, whether it is peace, whether it is diplomats of one country and diplomats of other countries. So there is no joint vision. Have we ever came up with any agreement that will jointly will tackle the problems facing marginal women, the problem facing unorganized workers, the problem facing migrants, the problem, because it is a common problem and it will keep happening because the borders are so porous, the borders are so close, people have so much cultural affinity, so much linkages, so much connections across borders that these will continue. But we do not have a joint solution. We only say Bangladesh is pushing their nationals to India, and they will say India is trying to push all Bangladeshi people to Bangladesh through CAA, NRC and all those stuffs. So the question is that unless and until we have a perspective of commons, we cannot arrive at peace or peace-like situation. Now, the most important fact is that then who will be these peace builders? Who are the agents of peace builders? If I say, and maybe the sense of my speech is that the diplomats have failed so far, because there is no permanent peace-like situation, because India has not been able to influence the smaller neighboring countries to an extent that all accept democracy as their model form of government. All the neighboring countries, that has not been still date. So then who would be the agents of this peace building? We have seen all these stuffs called track 2 diplomacy, track 3 diplomacy, track 4 diplomacy and all these things. Now here I would like to push all of you to think, maybe it may be an abstraction, but what I am thinking is that I am thinking in the line of what Negri and Hart has called multitude, the virtual space. Can we not utilize this virtual space, fruitfully? Rather than spreading fake news and all these deep fake stuffs, can we not utilize this virtual space to build a robust robust conversation on issues of commons? Can we not see beyond our national interest at least on 3-4 issues of commons? Why we cannot have a joint venture, joint investment venture of India, Nepal, Bhutan and Bangladesh to have a road and rail corridor across these nation states to maintain that? Why India has to take the lead always? That is always also a question. Always Western countries will say that India, why are you thinking of being a global power? Because if you cannot manage your own neighborhood. You are not a regional power. How do you aspire to be a global power? That is a big question from the Western Bloc. But the question is why India is also a part of this South Asia. Is one of the nation states of South Asia. Maybe it has a bigger landmass, it has a bigger population, it has a bigger economy, but it is a single entity. Always you have to have initiatives from India. The only one initiative that came beyond India is from Bangladesh, and that was to create Sarker, to contain the big brother attitude of India. Any fruitful initiative, any fruitful suggestions from the smaller neighboring countries to manage, to maintain the issues of commons? I haven't seen. There was a proclamation by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in one of the Sarker summit in Nepal about green Sarker building, the eco-friendly situations. But after that, Sarker as an organization has reached a dead end. But then you just go through, I would request all the students to go through the pages of Ministry of External Affairs. You go through the pages of Ministry of External Affairs of India and all these countries. See the difference, and I have seen the difference. The number of paragraphs and pages India have on the smaller neighbors annually, hardly for the last 10 years taken together, all these neighboring countries in their Ministry of External Affairs have pages for India, paragraphs for India. India would continuously keep recording that what it has done annually, so far as investment is concerned, exchange is concerned with the smaller neighboring countries. These smaller neighboring countries would never record what has happened. Because see, if India records that in the last financial year, we have 2000 exchanges, say, for example, between India and Bangladesh, cultural exchanges. So that should be the record in Bangladesh website also. You visit Bangladesh website, there is no mention. You visit Indian website, Ministry of External Affairs, the number of investment projects that India has given in Nepal or Bhutan, hydroelectric projects and all. You visit simultaneously Nepal, Bhutan, Ministry of External page, no mention, no record of that. Why? So that is the question, that every nation state is being guided by their own parochial national interest, which is not bad, but which is not enough to establish peace. European countries have been able to think collectively. That's why they are a union. Maybe they do not have a checkered history. Maybe they do not have this violent history of partition and repartition like South Asia. But to an extent, all of us, all ordinary citizens in all the nation states, they define peace only in the line of maintaining a decent lifestyle. Maintaining a decent lifestyle, that is the, with dignity, with proper basic facilities, with smooth public service. Every ordinary citizen you talk in all these regions, all these states, this is the basic demand and basic definition of peace for them, at least peace at the level of society. So if this is the common definition of peace, this is the common expectation of ordinary citizen in all the nation states, all the states that comprise this Eastern South Asia or South Asia as a whole, why cannot be there a basic common approach which is accepted by all the smaller nation states. So the agency is very important, the agents of peace building. And I think in this age of technology, the virtual space, the social media is the most important tool of peace building or building an atmosphere of hatred. You see pictures viral that these Bangladesh students, treating Indian flag as a doormat, right? Passing over these, and then you have this anti-Bangladesh feeling, right? I mean, you must have, but have you made a comparative study among all the students of Bangladesh? That whether they have this anti-India sentiment across or not. So, this kind of image creation, this kind of perception generation and perception and narrative generation is happening in the space of social media. What I would suggest is that let us have some positive approach. See one thing, for the last 1 month or last 6-7 months, the media channels and newspapers in West Bengal are flooded with news from Bangladesh, right? I was reminded of 2001 when I was an undergraduate student. For several days, the frontline issue was the massacre happening in the Nepal royal family. The monarch the family members getting killed. So my issue is that whenever there is massacre happening, chaos happening in neighboring countries, you have the frontline news. But when the Padma Setu was being built, metro railway was being built in Bangladesh, do we cover that news also? Do we, when External Affairs Minister was Pranab Mukherjee, went to Bangladesh, made some foundation of Tagore and all the Rabindranath Tagore scholarship and all those stuffs, when the South Asian University is being formed, something happening, do we have the frontal news attraction? We don't. So we only highlight the faults, the massacres, the chaos that is happening. So what I would suggest is that primarily today we have the social media and the technology, and it is the primary agent of building peace or building hatred, because they are the primary agent of creating image, creating narratives. So you question diplomats rightly that whether you are going in the right path or not. You can question them, you can even suggest them. But whatever I am suggesting is to have a very positive approach. You say Bangladesh has democracy deficit. Why? Because we are Indians. You go to Western Bloc, India has democracy deficit. So whether you are yet Indian, right? I am reminded of this Wallenstein satellite, periphery, semi-periphery. So our locations keep changing. You go to Europe and you talk about India, you will talk about democracy deficit, democracy backsliding. You sit in India, you see these periphery countries, you talk about democracy deficit, democracy backsliding. So the question is from where you are viewing, from which position you are analyzing. So everyone of us, all the nations, it is not that India is the best model of everything. This is a habit that India's model is the best model. We have to come out of this habit. India proclaiming in G20 forum that all this is happening, one earth, one family. Have we talked about one region? We are talking about one earth, one family, one future. What about your regional future? What about one region, one future? Let us start from the basics. So I think there are many fault lines across nation states, whether it is India, whether it is Pakistan, whether it is Sri Lanka, whether it is Bangladesh. And these fault lines needs to be corrected, both at the level of diplomacy as well as the level of perception generation among ordinary citizen, and the way we utilize the social media space. I stop here and I will have questions and interactions more. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chattopadhyay. Students, now the question answer session will be continued by our chairperson, Dr. Shantanu Chakrabarti.
If you have any questions, please go ahead. Yes, please.
At present, we are seeing that China is the ambassador to Bangladesh. There, we are seeing that some sort of a diplomatic, what should I say, China and Bangladesh are coming very close together. Now, this was expected. But how are they going to go about it? Because initially Bangladesh, China had proposed major infrastructural investments. At the present political turmoil that is happening in Bangladesh, how is China viewing the recent developments there? And recently only they had signed agreements on health and education. So how are they going about it?
Would you like to take 2 or 3 questions together, or? So, currently I don't see any raised hands, so please, please. Don't wait for a queue, just raise your hands and ask questions.
What do you think will be the future of BIMSTEC? Because India is also a part of BIMSTEC, and now with what's going on in Bangladesh.
2, perhaps another one, and then the speaker will answer. You have a question? Yeah, please.
Actually, it was a very basic question, but sir mentioned about diplomatic states and positive states. What can be some of the positive states for in regard to India without the neighboring states for diplomacy and peace?
3 questions.
Thank you. I think the first 2 questions are related in the sense that how the perception about going on with economic investment and this economic or multi-sectoral organization will be affected by political turmoil or not. This is the basic essence of both the questions. One is specific about China, the other is about the multilateral forum. My answer is that the political turmoil or the political change, so far as China is concerned specifically, China has nothing to do, and China is not interested who is there in power. China is only interested whether their investment or the infrastructure on which they are investing are secured or not. Whether Bangladesh army are agreeing to have China to put their own security staffs to secure their industries or infrastructural area that they are building. Only thing is that they will stop investing only when they will see that their industries are being destroyed. Their infrastructural setup are being destroyed. Unless and until they will continue investment, because only thing, all the South Asian countries, and I had a talk with a colleague from University of Colombo. No, I was asking that, see, when you were in turmoil, India went there, right? Our external affairs minister went there, tried to give help, economic aid. But then again you fall back to China. Why? The reply was very candid and very honest. That particular person told me that we are very sure that China can keep on investing in the same manner for the next 100 years. We are not sure whether India will invest today, tomorrow, next 30 years, whether India will keep on investing in the similar manner, similar trend. That we are Maybe we know that what is in store, a very bleak future for us, but we accept that. So the question is how you develop your economic posture. Whether you see the India's position in the hunger index. And now India is talking about these achieving all these third largest economy and all. So the perception your neighboring countries have about your economy is very important. So the answer is China will keep on investing unless and until it has a threat on its own infrastructural zone. So far as BIMSTEC is concerned, BIMSTEC is one of the only forum, maybe in South and Southeast Asia, which has a future. Because today those scholars who were earlier working on South Asia now are working more on BIMSTEC. For them, future of South Asia, future of this Southern Asia is on BIMSTEC. I can name one scholar, she is very close to me, she is just like my elder sister, Onusua Bosurai. She is presently at URF, Kolkata. Now earlier time, her basic book was on South Asian diplomacy. She was talking about beneficial bilateralism and all. But last 5-6 years, I talked with Professor Bosurai Choudhury, and Professor Bosurai Choudhury is continuously writing and researching on BIMSTEC. Because the answer is that if South Asia has to manage all the problems, it has to manage through economic cooperation, through cultural cooperation, and for that, BIMSTEC is the best platform. So, political turmoil in Bangladesh, whether how long it will continue or not, Bangladesh as a nation state, whoever comes to in power, whoever is there in power, they cannot ignore BIMSTEC. Like they cannot ignore India's presence, they cannot ignore Chinese investment, they cannot ignore BIMSTEC as well. So far as steps that I indicated that, regime building is very important to manage the commons. So now we have to understand what are the specific problems that all of us are facing. One is about water, issues of water sharing, issues of these extreme climatic conditions, issues of artificial intelligence, how we could develop, jointly to manage our borders, to secure our citizens. It's not that I am there, I will send vaccines whenever, pandemic happens. This kind of attitude will create a negative perception. The question is, well, maybe today my infrastructure, my economy is better, so I have produced vaccine, I am sending that. But maybe for the next pandemic in store, let us have joint production. Joint management approach is what India must follow from now on in order to have a peaceful environment in South Asia.
Are there any more questions? Please. There.
Hello. Sir, very good afternoon. Sir, you talked about the very stakeholdership of India in upholding the regional peace and suggested that a regional forum should be made to look after the issue and asked India to inspire from the European subcontinent, right? So my question lies, since regional cooperation comes where both the parties are, let's say, equally invested, don't you think that it is better for India to have a greater cooperation and connectivity with the rest of the world rather than trying to confine itself within a region which even you claimed in the very part of your initial speech that doesn't even have a fixed map?
Thank you. I think it's a good question. Please sit down. So India is basically doing that. What you are saying, India has started doing. You see, India in 2014, in the Prime Minister swearing in ceremony, it was only South Asia. 5 years down the line, the romantic approach with South Asia went away. Invited BIMSTEC countries. 5 years down the line in 2024, no such invitation either to BIMSTEC or specifically to SARC. Rather, we are focusing on G20, managing the global forums, giving more prescriptions and Indian perspectives, India's knowledge that the world can learn from, India's innovations like digital public infrastructure and all. But the basic question is, in the studies, scholarly studies on neighborhood, if you see neighborhood as a subject, there is this dilemma of concentrating on immediate neighbors or extended neighbors or distant neighbors. Because neighbors are not only those with which you have a geographical connection, but with those even with which you have a similar political affiliation, like democracies. All democracies across the world are maybe, in a sense, neighbor of India, because they all have a democratic form of government, right? So, you can define neighbors in so many terms, but you cannot ignore your geographical location. So, unless you mend the fence, unless you have confidence of your neighbors on you, and you invest on having cordial relationship with the rest of the world, you will always have a problem at your backyard, tensions at your backyard. So India is going in the direction you are suggesting, but India is also trying to manage this volatile neighborhood, and we have only some prescriptions, some suggestions how to better the situation. Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions? Comments? I think there are no more questions.
Thank you for the questions. As we are nearing the end of the second technical session, I would invite our chairperson, Dr. Shantanu Chakrabarti, to sum up both the sessions and maybe arrive at some conclusions. Sir, the stage is yours.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible. Yeah. Thanks. The best thing about speaking last is whatever required to be said has already been said, particularly since we had two very eminent speakers who have comprehensively given you an idea about several nuances, twists and turns involved in both the conceptualizations, the concept, how we conceptualize Eastern South Asia, and of course, how we could frame Bangladesh. The first speaker, the eminent journalist, has already spoken about the recent turmoil in Bangladesh, to what extent you could draw a background to whatever is happening now, and to what extent have been the involvement of all the parties involved. And Dr. Chattopadhyay here has very comprehensively given you an idea about how regional dynamics play out, what are lacking, which has led to less signs of coordination and cooperation in our region in comparison to several other regions in the world. Now, I will then probably end by making certain general comments, perhaps 2 to 3 points. 3 points. Number one point, how are we, having listened to both the speakers, I was thinking how to link up both these concepts of East and South Asia and, of course, the current dynamics in Bangladesh. I think one way we could do it is by taking up by considering Eastern South Asia as a specific region within IR. Now, as students of IR and of different social sciences here, we know that regions get constructed. Regions are not simple geographic static units, and regions get constructed. They evolve through interactions between the human element and the territoriality factor. So there is always, there is a history, there is a dynamics between how regions get constructed. These relationships need not always be cordial. You might have, take the case of India and Pakistan, for instance, framing up giving a distinctive shape to South Asian politics. It might be confrontational, but it's historical. It's something of historic origin which has continued to evolve over time. There could be, of course, examples of cooperation also. Now, how do we link up Bangladesh within such a territorial framework? Now, I'm going to risk my neck out here, be a little provocative since it's almost the end of the day and end of the session. And I hope Chatham House rules will be obeyed here, and would argue that I think one major problem with Bangladesh is because conceptually it has always been a very artificial concept. If you look at the beginning of developing this entire idea of having a distinctive Islamic identity in Bengal, and the quest began much before, of course, 1971. Just to give you one example from history, many of us have read autobiography of eminent Bengali historian Ramesh Chandra Majumdar. Now, if you read his autobiography, as we know, he was working in Calcutta University, and then he decides to join Dhaka University when it gets set up in 1921. Why? The principal reason was the government, the then government, British government, was deliberately encouraging to develop Dhaka in order to counter Calcutta University. And one way it was doing it, it was offering higher salaries to the faculty members who will join Dhaka University. And if you read Ramesh Chandra Majumdar's, he was a young scholar then, Ashutosh Mukherjee hauled him. This was his second tenure as Calcutta University Vice Chancellor. And in his usual way, he thundered, "Why are you going to this new university?" He said, "Sir, for money." I said, "Well, then I cannot blame you. Go there, but in case if there is any problem, you can always come back to Calcutta University." Well, just like, that sort of British attitude, probably trying to develop a distinctive Islamic identity, that would continue. That would be continued later. And if you look at 1971, after 1947, we know the turmoil which had happened. Many of us do not remember this old book written by our former teacher and one of the most distinguished scholars of South Asia, Professor Kumar, who wrote this book, Democracy and Nationalism on Trial in East Pakistan. The book came out in 1968, only a few years before 1971 would happen. And he was giving you his idea. Something which has already been told by Mr. Halder in the morning session, that it was never one-sided. If you look at the political turmoil which was taking place between East Pakistan, Eastern Bangladesh, East Pakistan, and then, of course, Bangladesh between 1948 and 1971. It was not that all the Bengali Muslims in East Pakistan were unanimously opposing the rule from Pakistan. There were, and here he brings out, and it's not that entire West Pakistan believed in dominating East Pakistan, and he gives a very important example, which is also important for Professor Chattopadhyay's given talk on regionalism. Mehboob-ul Haq, the veteran Pakistani economist, for instance, who was in charge of Pakistani 5-year plans. Back in early 1960s, as a member of the Pakistani 5-year plan, was pointing out that the way West Pakistan is discriminating against East Pakistan, there is going to be a major flare-up sooner or later. And then, of course, we have 1971. How Bangladesh has progressed from 1971 and beyond, and of course, what has been India's role in all this. I think one primary mistake which India did was we continued to depend and continued to believe in the so-called 1971 syndrome. If you read the autobiography of Subimal Dutt, the longest serving Indian foreign secretary, who was working, who had joined Indian civil service during colonial times. He had retired by 1971, but he was brought back because he was originally born in Bangladesh, and because he hailed from that area, Indira Gandhi brought him out from retirement and sent him as India's first High Commissioner to Bangladesh immediately after 1971. Some of his diaries, which were kept in our university, where there is now a book. A book was published by a German-based Indian scholar, Amit Dasgupta, and if you read as the first High Commissioner, he was one of those old days veteran neutral diplomats. And he was saying the way junior Indian diplomats are hobnobbing with members of the Awami League. He particularly mentioned one particular diplomat who was also going to become famous much later, Arundhati Ghosh, who would lead India's negotiations on nuclear policy later on. He said the way she is, attending Awami League party with Sheikh Mujib's son, attending their cultural programs, etc. We need to remember that we are supposed to be diplomats, and it may be very well to talk about the great era of Indo-Bangladesh friendship, etc. But we need to maintain at least a facade of neutrality. And then we know what happened after 1975. Probably, if somebody had, remembered Subimal Dutt's work, this wouldn't have come as a surprise. To my surprise, that 1971 syndrome still seems to be haunting Indian Foreign Office. About 5-6 years back, the local Kolkata, India Ministry of External Affairs branch, which has its office in Baliganj area, they used to run a monthly program on Bangladesh, and it focused largely, essentially upon 1971. So people they would bring in, it would be small sessions with journalists who used to work in All India Radio during 1971, or scholars who used to write on or who had experienced 1971. So all our focus on India-Bangladesh seems to have been concentrating even as late as 2015, 2016 on the 1971 syndrome. And this has come to haunt us in a major way. And the third point I would say is that in spite of our talks about the great Bengal and the Bengali connection, etc., probably it shouldn't have, it could have been noticed that within Bangladesh there was a distinctive turn towards Islamization, certainly 1980s and 1990s onwards. And it was not only happening through the Qaumi Madrasa syndrome, but also very much culturally evident. One of my students who worked primarily on Qaumi madrasas in West Bengal and certain border areas in Bangladesh, the sort of syllabus which is being taught, the sort of books which are being offered to students. And apart from that, he also brought out this important, he brought out this important point that if you look at the cultural dimension, apparently I was told that several new cultural books, with an Islamist hero, fighting various sorts of demons, which could be India, which could be the Western society, etc., a character which was being created, a major theme which was emerging for adolescent literature. He was also talking about the way the new style Islamic music was being produced, being presented as pop songs, etc., in order to popularize it to students. So it's not that this was not happening for a long time. Somehow our policymakers or our bureaucrats, I do not know whether the political leadership or it's the bureaucrats in the MEA who are determining our policy towards Bangladesh right now. But it seems to be we're caught unawares. What is going to happen? Of course, we are going to remain in turmoil, because when the recent developments in Bangladesh were initially being held as the second independence for Bangladesh, I suddenly remembered, there are various jokes about the veteran Indian Army General, Field Marshal Cariappa, who also later on became Chief of Army Staff. He hailed from modern day Karnataka region, and he had very poor grasp of Hindi. Now, on the eve of India's first independence on 1947, he was, as an army general, he was supposed to address a group of Indian soldiers in Hindi. And he got up on the stage and he said, "Bhai log, aaj se hum sab muft ho gaye." Is it, and when I see what is happening in Bangladesh and how independence, the term independence, is being communicated to, I am wondering whether everything has become muft in Bangladesh now. Mayhem, looting, killing, molestation. It's a free for all society. It seems that turmoil is going to remain there for some time. Whether there is going to be an Indian intervention, as some people seem to be suggesting from Delhi, especially some veteran army groups who ran WhatsApp campaigns. We hear all sorts of talks of a certain part of northern Bangladesh being sliced off, etc., and the Siliguri corridor is going to be extended. We hear representatives of the ruling political dispensation, coming on television debates, and when they asked, Indira Gandhi did that, what is your current leadership doing? They said Indira Gandhi took 8 to 9 months. Please wait for 8 to 9 months to see what our Prime Minister will do. So are we waiting for Trump's sanctions to really take shape and oust the current dispensation from power? As Mr. Halder pointed out, there are other political dispensations in Bangladesh also in some sort of back-channel negotiations with several Indian hands here. In any way, it's going to be a society in turmoil. And I think to sum it, I would argue that this is natural. Natural because, number one, I would argue that Bangladesh has been an artificial creation, and it has always required some support to stay intact. During colonial times, this entire concept of Eastern Bengal and Assam, we all know how it was shaped, to what extent there was a role played by the existing British government in propping it up. And in post-1971 period, we know how India helped to maintain the country and the ruling party in power. But overall, to an extent, you might argue, in that case, many would consider Pakistan created in 1947 also probably as an artificial creation. But it might have been an artificial creation too, but because of its strategic, it was considered to be much more strategically vital. If you read Rakesh Ankit's book, etc., how when the British were ceding space to the Americans there, how they insisted the importance has to be given to Pakistan as a possible bulwark against intrusions of Soviet Union into several other areas, and how his book was essentially on why Kashmir was considered to be important, and how that shaped up American policy making, favorable policy making, particularly of the army, the American military establishment towards Pakistan. But I think coming back to our original question, because remember we are considering the present situation in Bangladesh in the context of Eastern South Asia. And to that extent, I would argue that if we look at our region, we need to remember that we are, of course, we claim ourselves to be nation states, but probably someone could argue back that we are veteran nations. We are old nations having historical continuities, etc. But as states, we have emerged later. Even if you take into account the colonial period as a period influencing your state formation. Now, states and as different to nations and some people, there are scholars who argue that in South Asia, you essentially have state nations rather than nation states, where states take a leading role in shaping up nations. And when you do that, the elements or the constituents of the nation compete with each other to garner lion's share of the state support. That has happened in India, and that is happening in India also. And probably that has been happening in Bangladesh, and that is continued to happen in Bangladesh. And within IR, and in peace and conflict studies, we are often taught that conflict essentially is not a bad term. Conflict is good. It helps in your it comes as a challenge, and it helps in development of your personality, facing off, accepting those challenges, trying to fight off those challenges. Conflicts may be a good thing, but what if conflicts leading to violence? Probably you will have a lot of conflict-induced violence, which are essentially a part of this ancient battle between nation and state. Whether you look at it India, as Professor Chattopadhyay correctly has pointed out, if you look at this entire shape of South Asia, and presently, because you have a weak state in Bangladesh, of course, the battle between the different constituents of the nations are going to intensify. Whether it's going to be solved, whether they can solve it on their own, has the state matured enough, or would it still require some sort of an external intervention? Because that has been the history of Bangladesh since its creation in 1971. And if we think about creation of this separate Islamic identity in Eastern India, the Bengali Muslim identity, I think that this is something which is going to continue for some time at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chakrabarti, for summing up the two sessions so brilliantly, for tying them up in such a beautiful manner. As we end the session, the programs, we will be having our official vote of thanks, and for that I would request Dr. Srimoy Guha Thakurata from the Department of History to deliver the vote of thanks.
You're clapping before the vote of thanks, so it's been a very long day. However, we had a wonderful 2 sessions of brainstorming, I would say. And so I would like to begin by giving thanks to our 2 speakers, Dr. Chattopadhyay and Sri Deep Halder. Thank you so much for giving us this time and for patiently taking in the questions and answering them. A very special thanks to Professor Shantanu Chakrabarti. Sir, we still consider you to be one of us. So we will keep calling you back in various capacities, and we would love to have you back again. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. Programs in this college is never organized in this manner without constant support from our college authorities. So a special thanks to our principal, Dr. Mondol, to our vice principal, Dr. Dash, to our IQAC coordinator, Dr. Bhattacharjee, to our bursar, Dr. Nondi, and to our Senator Secretary, Dr. Vidisha Haldar, and of course to the Secretary of Teachers Council, Dr. Indrani Kaur. Thank you to all of them for your constant encouragement. I would like to also thank the 3 departments which have collaborated with the SCC Peace Studies Cell, the faculty members of the Departments of History, Political Science and Philosophy. A big thank you to the members of the Peace Studies Cell, and a very special note of thanks to Dr. Riddhi Bhattacharya, the convener of the SCC Peace Studies Cell. It was her vision and her determination that we will have this discussion in the college that has made this possible. And she has been ably supported by Pradipto also. So thank you to both of them for being the brains behind this particular program. Thank you so much. A special thanks again to our non-teaching staff. I don't think we say thanks enough to them because they silently work and they have no idea how much we depend on them. Without them, these programs would be impossible. So a very, very big applause is due towards our non-teaching staff. A very special thanks to our very own Dr. Shushmita Gonzalez of Department of Political Science for holding it all together for the entire day. And of course to our audience, thank you so much students from our college, from outside our college, faculty members who have also come here to attend the seminar. Thank you to you that you have made this an extremely vibrant and active seminar, so to speak. Thank you, everyone.